The chamber smelled like recycled air and old decisions. 312 species filled the Galactic Concord Hall that morning, seated in rising tiers that curved upward like the inside of a ribcage. And at the center, right there at the lowest point where all the light fell and all the silence gathered, sat 3 Velith elders on chairs that were not built for their bodies. Taeyun was the oldest of the 3. She was amphibian in the way that made other species uncomfortable. Slick blue-gray skin that caught the light, wide black eyes that never blinked, a body that seemed to breathe through its surface rather than its mouth. The Velith glowed. That was the thing everyone knew about them, bioluminescence that shifted with mood, with thought, with the harmonic vibrations they used instead of voices. Right now, Taeyun's glow was the color of a candle behind frosted glass, dim. The Concord speaker, a Draelith with 6 arms and the emotional range of a filing cabinet, read the agenda item without looking up. Motion 14-7, reclassification of species designate Velith from protected cooperative status to non-viable, with immediate withdrawal of all resource commitments, embassy personnel, and territorial obligations. 14 words that meant, you are no longer worth keeping alive. The blight had been eating Suaneth's oceans for 2 galactic years. Black water spreading like ink dropped in milk, killing everything it touched. The coral networks, the deep thermal vents the Velith used for spawning, the tidal forests where their children learned to sing. Every species in this room had received the reports. Every species in this room had Velith translators in their courts, Velith mediators in their trade disputes, Velith harmonists in their hospitals who could calm a dying patient's nervous system with a single sustained chord. And every species in this room was about to vote yes. The tally climbed. Taeyun watched the holographic numbers rise the way a person watches rain when they have already accepted they left the window open. The Karethi voted yes, all 6 billion of their hive mind processing the decision as one. The Torvasians voted yes while their delegate checked something on a personal screen. The Oresan, ancient, respected, the species that employed more Velith than any other civilization in the galaxy, voted yes, with a small speech about difficult but necessary resource prioritization that lasted 40 seconds and meant nothing. When the tally hit unanimous, Taeyun's glow pulsed once, bright. A single flare of violet white that lit the underside of every delegate's face for half a heartbeat. It was the Velith equivalent of a scream. Not one delegate looked down. The session moved to item 15. 2 systems away, Commander Alara Voss was not sleeping. This was not unusual. Voss had not slept a full night in 4 years. Not since a planet called Rithara. Not since an evacuation order she followed when she should not have. Not since she didn't think about Rithara. She thought about the fact that her comms officer, Petty Officer Singh, was asleep at his station with his cheek pressed against the console and a small line of drool connecting him to a classified frequency monitor. The UEN Harlan County was a decommissioned patrol frigate, running garbage escort through the outer spiral. 38 crew members, a cafeteria that served the same 4 meals in rotation, and engines that made a sound like a dog whining every time they dropped below half thrust. Voss was 41 years old. With Appalachian vowels she had spent 2 decades sanding out of her voice, and a service record that read like a demotion written in slow motion. She was not supposed to be monitoring Concord feeds. But Singh was asleep, and Voss had insomnia, and insomnia made her do things like tune into political channels at 3 in the morning, and listen to alien bureaucrats decide the fate of species she had never met. She heard the vote. She heard the number climb. She heard the Concord speaker move to item 15, a trade tariff adjustment on synthetic minerals, with the same tone used to announce the end of an entire people. Voss sat in the dark bridge of her garbage frigate and pressed her thumb against the edge of the console hard enough to leave a mark. She did not move for 7 minutes. Then she opened a channel to her XO, Lieutenant Commander David Park, who was in his quarters, doing what normal people do at 3 in the morning. Park. His voice came back groggy and annoyed. Commander, it's 03. How much fuel do we have? A pause. Enough for the escort run plus reserve. Why? How much if we skip the escort? A longer pause. Commander, where are we going? Voss did not answer right away. She looked at the feed, still running, still cycling through agenda items, and she thought about 3 figures sitting in chairs that did not fit them, in a room that had just decided they were no one's responsibility. She thought about Rathara. Park's voice came back, quieter this time. Not again? 2 words. They carried 4 years of shared silence, a planet neither of them mentioned, the weight of N. Order followed, and a cost paid, and a lesson that lived in the space between Voss's ribs, like a second heartbeat. Voss said, "Get dressed." She filed the course deviation at 0322. Destination, Suaneth, Velith Homeworld, Outer Spiral Quadrant 7. The navigation system flagged it as non-standard. The duty officer flagged it as unauthorized. Voss entered her reason in the ship log with the careful keystrokes of someone who knows exactly how much trouble she is about to be in, and has decided that trouble is the point. Mechanical difficulties requiring planetary layover. Her chief engineer, Petty Officer Rio Castellan, read the log entry from his bunk and laughed so hard he woke up the entire engineering bay. There were no mechanical difficulties. The Harlan County ran like a dog with 3 legs, badly but reliably. Everyone on the bridge knew it was a lie. Park knew. Singh, who had woken up with console marks on his face and mild panic in his eyes, knew. Nobody filed a counter-report. Nobody requested clarification. Nobody asked Voss what she was doing, because every single person on that ship had heard the vote, or heard about the vote, or heard the particular quality of silence that fills a vessel when its commander has decided to do something decent and stupid in equal measure. A Harlan County changed course. A garbage frigate with 38 crew and engines that whined like a kicked animal, turning toward a dying planet that the entire galaxy had just agreed was not worth saving. Voss sat in the command chair and stared at the dark between stars, and did not sleep. In her left jacket pocket, where she always kept it, a pen from a desk on a planet she was never going back to pressed its weight against her ribs. She did not reach for it. She did not need. 2. It was always there. The ocean was black. Not the kind of black that water gets at night, when it borrows darkness from the sky and gives it back at dawn. This was the black of something eaten from the inside. A thick, copper-smelling black that swallowed light the way a throat swallows, and did not return it. Voss stood on the shore of Suaneth and watched it, and thought, we brought a garden hose to fight a burning continent. The Harlan County sat in a clearing half a kilometer inland, looking exactly like what it was, a military frigate parked in a place it had no business being, surrounded by vegetation that pulsed faintly blue in the low light. The Velith had gathered at a distance. Several hundred of them, amphibian bodies huddled on the shrinking landmass, their bioluminescence flickering in uneven patterns that Voss's crew had already started calling confused Christmas lights. They did not approach. They watched. That was what the Velith did. Voss was learning. They watched and they waited and they tried to figure out what you wanted from them before you had a chance to take it. Taeyun came alone. She moved across the wet ground with a gait that was half walk and half glide, her wide black eyes fixed on Voss with the particular steadiness of someone who has been disappointed so many times that hope would be an act of violence against herself. Her harmonics came first, low, layered chords that Voss's translator rendered into flat words, that could not carry what the sound actually held. "What do you want from us?" Voss blinked. "We're here to help with the, what do you want from us?" The same question, the same chords, but Voss heard it differently this time. It was not rudeness. It was not suspicion. It was the only question the Velith had ever needed to ask, because in 4,000 years of galactic contact, no species had ever shown up without a price. List. Every hand extended toward the Velith had come with fingers that would eventually close into a fist. Voss said, "We want to clean your water." Taeyun's glow shifted, a half shade towards something cooler, something guarded. She did not say thank you. She turned and glided back toward her people. The crew worked. That was the thing about humans that the Velith would not understand for weeks. They just worked. Rio Castellan was first on the ground, with a water purification kit designed for a ship of 38, not an ocean, and he knew it, and he set it up anyway, with the manic energy of a man who treats every impossible problem like a personal insult the universe has aimed at his face. He was 27 years old, built like someone who had grown up carrying heavy things, and he talked to machines the way other people talk to pets, with affection and mild threats. Come on, you beautiful useless box," muttered at the filtration unit, while 3 Velith watched from behind a rock formation, like deer watching a campfire. The unit coughed. It sputtered. It processed 100 liters of black water and turned 60 of them clear. Rio stared at the 60 liters of clean water sitting in the collection tank like he had just pulled a living fish from a dead river. "Ha!" he shouted, and the 3 Velith behind the rocks went dark for a full second from the shock of the noise. It was not enough. 60 liters would not save an ocean. But Rio had an idea. A stupid, brilliant, completely unauthorized idea involving the ship's coolant recycler and a filtration membrane he would have to cut from the Harlan County's secondary hull lining. He brought the idea to Voss. Voss said, "Will it damage the ship?" "It will make the ship worse," said Rio. "How much worse?" "The kind of worse where we should probably not fly through any asteroid fields for a while." "Do it." Rio did it. He built a filtration array out of military-grade hull membrane and engine coolant tubing, and the sheer audacity of a man who had never once in his life accepted that something could not be fixed. He tested it on a tide pool near the northern shore, a small body of water maybe 10 meters across, black as ink, dead as stone. The array ran for 6 hours. When the water cleared, a Velith juvenile, tiny, translucent, no bigger than a human toddler, slipped into the pool from a crevice where she had apparently been hiding. She hit the clean water, and her entire body lit up. Not the dim flicker of the adults, a blaze, a full-spectrum, radiant, joyful blaze of color that was so bright, Rio had to throw his arm across his eyes and step backward and say a word in Spanish that his mother would not have approved of. The juvenile swam in circles, glowing, and every adult Velith within line of sight pulsed once in response, a ripple of light across the shore, like a wave made of something that was not water. Rio stood there with engine grease on his face, and tears he would later deny, and thought, 60 liters at a time. Then, night on Suaneth was not dark. The Velith glowed, and the land glowed with them, and the only thing that did not glow was the ocean, which sat against the shore, like a black mouth, waiting. Taeyun found Voss sitting on a rock near the waterline. She sat beside her, not close, not far, the precise distance of someone who does not yet know whether proximity is safe. Her harmonics were softer at night, lower, like a cello played in a room with no walls. "What will you take when you leave?" Voss looked at her. "We're not negotiating. Every species negotiates." "We're not every species," Voss said, and paused, and something in her face shifted. Not a smile, not quite, but the ghost of one that had survived whatever happened to all her other smiles. "We're the stupid one." Taeyun's glow flickered. The translator offered no word for what that flicker meant, and Voss did not ask. The messages started arriving on day 3. Galactic Concord diplomatic warnings, formal and cold, and written in the kind of language that uses politeness as a weapon. The United Earth vessel is in violation of Resolution 14-7, and is ordered to vacate Velith territorial space immediately. Voss read the first one. She deleted the rest without opening them, sitting at her console in the bridge, tapping the delete key with the rhythm of someone who has found a very small and satisfying way to tell the entire galaxy to go to hell. Park watched her from the Exo station, and said nothing. Singh watched from comms and said nothing. The whole bridge said nothing, which was its own kind of mutiny. The quiet kind. The kind that does not show up in logs. The kind that is just 38 people deciding together without a word that they are going to stay. On day 5, Rio came to Voss at 3 in the morning. This was becoming a pattern. Terrible news delivered in the small hours, as if the universe had decided that 0300 was the appropriate time to make things worse. He had been analyzing the blight's chemical structure. His face had the particular expression of a man who has found something he wishes he had not. "It's engineered," he said. Voss did not move. The molecular structure has markers, design markers, the kind you only get from intentional bioengineering. This thing was built, Commander. Someone made this and put it in their ocean. Voss looked at the data on the screen. She looked at it for a long time. Her hands did not shake. Her voice did not change. She said, "Leave the data and go get some sleep, Rio." Voss sat alone in the bridge in the dark, and she reached into her left jacket pocket and took out the pen. She held it, just held it, turning it between her fingers, a cheap pen from a cheap desk on a planet called Rithara, where she had followed an order and left people behind, and the pen was the only thing she had grabbed on the way out, because her hands needed to hold something, and the pen was there. She sat with it for an hour. Then she put it back, and opened a secure channel to Earth, and typed a message she did not expect anyone to answer. Blight is artificial. Velith were murdered. Requesting backup. Expecting refusal. She sent it. She waited. The black ocean pressed against the shore like it was listening. Earth said nothing. 4 days of silence. The kind of silence that has weight. The kind you can feel pressing against the hull of a ship like deep water pressure. The kind that means someone somewhere is arguing in a room with closed doors and no windows. Voss did not send a second message. She had been in the military long enough to know that silence was its own language, and this particular silence meant, "We heard you, and we are deciding whether hearing you is going to be expensive." Meanwhile, the work continued. Rio's filtration array was clearing tide pools at a rate of 1 every 2 days. Small victories in a war fought with stolen hull membrane and the kind of stubbornness that is either courage or insanity, depending on who is watching. The Velith were watching. They had been watching since the Harlan County landed, and somewhere in the second week, their watching had changed. It was not trust. Taeyun had made that clear. Her own way. Through small gestures and careful distances, that trust was not a thing her people gave. It was a thing taken from them so many times that the muscle for it had atrophied. But it was curiosity. And curiosity, Voss was learning, was the closest thing the Velith had to hope. Suith was young. Young for a Velith meant something different than young for a human. She was 82 galactic years old, which put her somewhere around the equivalent of a human in her 20s, still growing into the full range of her bioluminescence, still learning to control the harmonic frequencies that served as the Velith's primary language. She was also, by her people's standards, a troublemaker. Her glow patterns were erratic, sharp staccato pulses where most Velith produced smooth waves, and she had a habit of standing too close to the humans and studying their machines with the focused intensity of someone taking apart a clock in her mind. Called her the fire drill because her harmonics kept resonating with the Harlan County's hull and setting off the proximity alarms. The first time it happened, the entire crew scrambled to battle stations. The second time, Rio just walked to the airlock, opened it, and found Sueth standing 3 meters from the hull, with her head tilted, glowing in rapid patterns that his translator rendered as, "Your ship sings when I sing. Why does it do that?" "Because you're a walking tuning fork, and my ship is held together with hope and bad welding," Rio said. Sueth tilted her head the other way. They started working together the next day. The collaboration was absurd and beautiful. A 27-year-old Venezuelan engineer and an 82-year-old bioluminescent amphibian sitting on the shore of a dying ocean, passing tools back and forth, communicating through a translator that got things wrong at least 30% of the time. Understood biochemistry in ways that made Rio's engineering degree feel like a crayon drawing next to a symphony. She could read the blight structure by touch, pressing her webbed fingers into the black water and producing harmonics that mapped molecular bonds the way sonar maps a seabed. "The blight eats salt bonds," she told Rio on their third day, her glow pulsing in the teal-green pattern he had started thinking of as her working color. "If we break the salt bond appetite, the blight starves." "Break its appetite," Rio repeated. "You want to put the blight on a diet. I do not know what a diet is. It's a human thing where we decide to stop eating things that make us happy, and then we eat them anyway." Sueth's glow flickered in a pattern the translator could not parse. Rio chose to believe it was laughter. Taeyun came to Voss in pieces. Not all at once, never all at once, but in fragments dropped across days like someone leaving a trail of stones in a forest. Each one small enough to seem like nothing, each one heavy enough to change the path. On day 8, she said, "My people were not always translators." On day 10, she said, "Before the Concord found us, we healed." On day 12, she said nothing at all, but she sat closer to Voss than she had before, and her glow shifted through colors that the translator flagged as no direct equivalent, closest approximation, the feeling of holding something you thought you had lost. On day 14, she told Voss the rest. The Veleth's harmonic frequencies could do more than communicate. They could interface with biological systems, any biological system, any species, and accelerate cellular repair at a rate that made human medicine look like guessing. They had been healers, the best healers the galaxy had ever known. And then the galactic powers had done the math, and realized that a Veleth translator generated more economic value per cycle than a Veleth healer, because healing saved individual lives, but translation facilitated trade deals worth billions, and the math was the math, and the math did not care about what the Veleth were built to do. The healing knowledge was not lost. It was suppressed. Not by the Veleth, by their allies, their employers, the species that sat in Concord chambers and called themselves civilized, while they stripped an entire people down to their most profitable function. Voss listened to all of this, with the expression of someone adding a line to a ledger that was already very, very long. She asked one question: "Can your people still do it?" Taeyun's glow held steady. "We never stopped," she said. "We just stopped offering." The Dralith came on day 16. A diplomatic vessel, sleek and chrome and expensive, in the way that only species who have never had to worry about money can be expensive. Slid into orbit, above Sueneth, dispatched an ambassador with 6 arms, and a legal injunction that was 7,000 words long. The ambassador addressed Voss, in the Harlan County's cramped briefing room, with the particular condescension that old species reserve for young ones, the vocal equivalent of patting a child on the head. "Commander Voss, you are in violation of 17 interspecies sovereignty statutes, 4 Concord resource directives, and the terms of your own species' probationary membership in—" "How long?" Voss said. The ambassador paused mid-arm gesture. "I'm sorry? How long did the Dralith use Veleth translators in your courts?" Silence. "How many Veleth worked in your embassies, your hospitals, your trade halls? How many of them made your civilization run for how many centuries, ambassador?" The ambassador's 6 arms went very still. That is not longer than we've had space travel, said, and her voice was level, and her face was level, and the only thing that was not level was the thing behind her eyes that Park recognized, and Rio recognized, and every crew member in earshot recognized as the particular calm that Ilara Voss wore when she was furious. You used them longer than my species has been able to leave our own planet, and you couldn't spare a water filter? The ambassador left within the hour. Within 6 hours, 3 more species sent warnings. Within 12, a formal Concord resolution was drafted condemning humanity's interference. Voss deleted every message. Earth's silence continued. On day 18, Sueth collapsed. She was working with Rio on the blight enzyme, crouched over a sample tray, harmonics running at the high-frequency pitch she used for molecular analysis, and her glow stuttered, and her legs folded, and she dropped. Rio caught her. She weighed almost nothing, maybe 30 pounds, hollow-boned like a bird, and her bioluminescence went dark. Not dim, dark. 11 seconds of nothing. Rio held her and counted every one of those seconds, the way a person counts when they are not sure if what they are holding is still alive. On second 12, her glow came back, but it was wrong, a color no one on the crew had seen before, a deep shifting violet that pulsed in patterns the translator could not touch. Tae-yoon was across the camp. She saw it. She made a sound that traveled across the distance between them like a physical thing, a harmonic that hit Rio in the chest and made his eyes water, for reasons he could not name. The translator flagged it as untranslatable, closest approximation, grief, or perhaps gratitude. That slash sat in the air between 2 words that should not be neighbors, and Rio looked at it on his screen and thought, that is the whole story of these people in a single piece of. Oh, day 19. Earth broke silence. The transmission came on a channel Voss had not heard used since the Rathara War. United Earth Naval Command, Priority Alpha. The frequency reserved for things that are either very good or very bad and are usually both. She read it at her console. She read it twice. Then she walked outside into the blue-lit dark of Suaneth and found Tae-yoon standing at the waterline, watching the black ocean do the only thing it knew how to do. Earth is sending ships, Voss said. Tae-yoon did not turn. How many? Voss looked at the message on her screen one more time, because the number still did not seem real, because the number was the kind of number that changes what a moment means. 47 ships came through the jump point above Suaneth in a single wave, and the sky turned dark with them. Not warships. That was the part that the galaxy would not understand for weeks. The part that would break every diplomatic model and every threat assessment and every tidy prediction about what the youngest spacefaring species would do when it finally showed its hand. They were not warships. They were construction vessels, water treatment carriers, atmospheric processing platforms, mobile biological laboratories, engineering barges, 47 ships full of people who had crossed the galaxy not to fight, but to fix. The United Earth Humanitarian Fleet, designation Echo 7, under the command of Admiral Lena Okonkwo, who stood on the bridge of the carrier Lagos and watched Suaneth grow in her viewport and said exactly one word to her bridge crew. Begin. The Velith did not understand what was happening. Stood on the shore, with her arms raised, not in greeting, not in surrender, but in the calming posture her people used to soothe frightened children. And her harmonics ran at the low, steady frequency that meant, do not run, do not hide, stay with me, I am here. Because 47 ships filling the sky over Suaneth did not look like rescue to a species that had spent 4,000 years learning that many ships meant new masters. The Velith could not panic. Their biology had no mechanism for it, no adrenaline equivalent, no fight or flight. But they could do something that looked worse. They went dim. All of them, at once. Every Velith on the visible shoreline Hundreds of them, maybe 1,000, lost their glow in the same moment. A rolling blackout of bioluminescence that spread across the land like someone pulling a plug. Rio, standing near the tide pools with Sueth in his arms, where she had been resting since her collapse, watched it happen, and felt something in his chest that he would later describe to Park as the worst feeling I have ever had, and I once fell into a sewage recycler. Voss saw it too. She opened a channel to the Lagos and said, "Admiral, tell your shuttles to come in slow. The Velith are shutting down. They think you're an invasion force." Okonkwo's voice came back clipped and calm. She spoke the way expensive watches tick, precise and unhurried, and giving the impression that time itself would wait for her to finish. "Understood, Commander. All units reduce descent speed to minimum atmospheric. Running lights only. No formation patterns. We come in soft, or we don't come in at all." The shuttle slowed. They came down through Suen's atmosphere like falling leaves, scattered, gentle, their lights dim and warm. And Taeyun stood on the shore with her harmonics running, and watched them land, and did not move until the first human stepped out. Woman in a blue jumpsuit, carrying a water testing kit. She was maybe 25 years old. She looked at the black ocean, and she looked at the dim Velith, and she looked at Taeyun, and she said, "Hi, where do you need us?" Taeyun's glow came back, just hers. A single point of light on a dark shore. And then another Velith flickered to life behind her, and then another. And then the glow rippled outward across the gathered crowd, the way dawn moves across water. Not all at once, but in a wave. And the wave was not joy, not yet. But it was the thing that comes before joy in people who have forgotten what it feels like. Okonkwo met Voss aboard the Harlan County. The admiral was 62 years old, Nigerian-British, with close-cropped gray hair, and the posture of someone who had been saluted so many times that standing straight was no longer a choice, but a condition. She looked around the cramped bridge of the patrol frigate, said, "You filed this mission as a mechanical difficulty." "Yes, Admiral. Your engines appear to be functioning." "Poorly, Admiral." "Commander Voss, I have been in the military for 39 years, and that is the most transparent lie I have ever seen committed to an official log." "Thank you, Admiral." Something that might have been a smile crossed Okonkwo's face, brief, controlled, like a bird landing on a wire and leaving before anyone could confirm it was there. Then she read Rio's report on the blight. The smile left. "You're certain it's engineered?" "Rio is the best chemist I have who is technically an engineer, and Sueth, the Velith researcher, confirmed the molecular structure has design markers that do not occur in nature." "Do you know who made it?" "Not yet." "Find out," Okonkwo said, and the two words carried the weight of a fleet behind them. The fleet worked the way human fleets work, which is to say, messily and loudly and with a startling amount of arguing and an even more startling amount of progress. Within 12 hours, the first ocean quadrant was being treated. Human engineers in hazmat suits waded into black water up to their chests and deployed filtration membranes by hand, because the ocean floor was too unstable for automated systems, and Rio stood on the shore and watched his makeshift tide pool design scaled up to industrial size, and said something in Spanish that was either a prayer or a curse, and was probably both. The Velith watched humans clean their ocean by hand. They watched them wade into water that stank of copper and death, water that burned human skin through the suits if the seals were not perfect, water that had already killed thousands of Velith, and the humans went in anyway. Sueth, still weak, still glowing in that strange violet that no one could name, leaned against Rio, and said, "Your species is broken." "Extremely," Rio said. "You walk into water that kills. We walk into a lot of things that kill." "Why?" Rio thought about it. "Because someone has to go first," he said, "and we're too dumb to wait for someone smarter." Sueth's glow flickered in that untranslatable pattern. Rio had decided weeks ago that it was laughter. The galaxy responded the way galaxies respond to things they do not understand. Some with grace, most with fear. The Kirethi sent a cargo hold of blight-resistant coral seed in unmarked containers with a single note that read, "We were wrong." 6 billion minds reaching consensus on 3 words. A handful of other species sent small shipments, medical supplies, water purifiers, atmospheric filters, all unmarked, all unofficial, all delivered in the middle of station nights as if aid were something to be ashamed of. The Drelith called for human sanctions. The Torvasians launched a propaganda campaign. Humanity was destabilizing galactic order for a non-viable species, and the broadcasts ran on every Concord channel with the polished production value of people who believe that presentation can replace conscience. Okonkwo ignored all of it. She had bigger concerns. Rio cracked it on a Tuesday. He would later find it funny that the most important discovery in galactic diplomatic history happened on a Tuesday, because Tuesdays were the day the Harlan County's cafeteria served the fish-shaped protein blocks that tasted like regret. And he had been eating one when the genome sequencer finished its analysis and everything changed. The blight was not just engineered. It was signed. The molecular design carried a genetic watermark, a species-specific coding signature that functioned like a fingerprint pressed into the structure of every molecule. And the fingerprint belonged to the Orasan, oldest member of the Concord, most respected voice in the chamber, the species that had employed more Velith than any other civilization. The species that had voted yes with a 40-second speech about difficult but necessary resource prioritization. They had built the blight. They had designed it to collapse Suaneth's ocean ecosystem over a period of years. Slow enough to look natural, fast enough to be irreversible. Forcing the Velith into permanent diaspora, scattering them across Orasan stations and colonies as permanent, planetless, unpaid laborers who could never go home because home would not exist. Engineered homelessness. Indentured servitude with the ocean as the enforcer. Rio brought the data to Okonkwo. Okonkwo looked at it for 4 seconds. Voss counted, because she was standing in the doorway, because she had been unable to sleep again, because some things you count without knowing why. Then Okonkwo said, "Release it." To Admiral, every channel, every frequency, every diplomatic feed and news relay and emergency broadcast system in the Concord. Let the galaxy hear what their oldest member did to the people who gave them a voice. The night before the broadcast, Taeyun found Voss on the shore. The black water was receding. Not gone, not close to gone, but retreating in patches where the filtration arrays had taken hold. And in those patches, the native bioluminescent coral was beginning to glow again, faint green pinpricks in the dark, like stars reflected in a place that had forgotten it could hold light. Taeyun sat beside Voss, close. Close enough that Voss could feel the warmth of her bioluminescence against her arm. Because Velith light was not just light, it carried heat, and the heat was the temperature of something living and impossibly gentle. "My people had a word for your people," Taeyun said, "before we met you, before your ships came, when we only knew you from your transmissions." Voss waited. "We called you the Loud Ones, because your signals reached us centuries before your ships, all that noise, all that signal pouring out of your system in every direction, like you could not help it. Like staying quiet was the one thing your species could not do." Taeyun's glow shifted. Warm amber, the color of something remembered. "We listened for a very long time," she said. "We thought you were calling for help." The ocean pressed against the shore. The stars did their ancient, useless work above. Voss sat with a warmth against her arm that she had not earned and did not deserve and was not going to leave. "Maybe we were," she said. At 0600 the next morning, Okonkwo authorized the broadcast. The data went out on every channel. The galaxy went quiet. Then the galaxy went loud. The Orisan ambassador's name was Vethal, and he had 600 years of diplomatic experience and 4 lungs and a voice like polished stone, and none of it was enough. He stood in the center of the Galactic Concord chamber, the same center where the Velith had sat when they were condemned, the same lowered floor where all the light gathered. And he spoke for 11 minutes about context and complexity and the nuances of interspecies resource management that younger civilizations could not be expected to understand. He used the phrase non-sovereign population 3 times. He used the phrase long-term strategic resettlement twice. He described the systematic poisoning of an ocean and the engineered extinction of a homeworld as proactive demographic redistribution. And the words came out of his 4 lungs, smooth and practiced and terrible. The chamber was silent, not the productive silence of deliberation, the other kind. Fills a room when 300 species hear their own logic said out loud by someone who does not know he is confessing. Because every species in that chamber had used the Velith. Every species had done the math. Translators are worth more than healers. Function is worth more than sovereignty. A useful people are not a free people. And every species had arrived at the same conclusion through different arithmetic. And now the Oresong were standing in the center of the room, saying it plainly, and it sounded exactly like what it was. The Draelith delegate, who had sent an ambassador to threaten Voss 16 days ago, stared at her console and did not speak. The Torvassian delegate, who had called humanity a destabilizing force, pressed his hands flat against the desk in front of him, as if the desk were the only solid thing in the room. The Karethi delegate, a young one, born after the first vote, her compound eyes reflecting the chamber lights in 100 fractured copies, leaned forward in her seat and watched Vethal with the stillness of someone memorizing a face. Vethal finished speaking. He waited for the procedural response, the counter-arguments, the motions, the tidy diplomatic choreography that had protected the powerful for as long as the Concord had existed. What he got was Taeyeon. She entered from the lower gallery. The same door she had left through on the day of the vote, the door that had closed behind 3 Velith elders walking into a corridor with no escort and no transport and no future. She was alone this time too. Her glow was low, a steady deep blue that pulsed with her breathing, and she moved to the center of the chamber floor with the slow, careful steps of someone returning to a room where something was taken from her. The Concord speaker said, "The chamber recognizes Taeyeon, elder of the Velith, sovereign representative of Sueneth." Word was new. It had not applied to the Velith the last time she stood here. Taeyeon looked up at the tiers, 312 species looking down at her. The same architecture, the same light, the same configuration that had processed her people's death as item 14 on a 22-item agenda. She did not talk about the Blight. She did not talk about the Oresan. She did not make an argument, or deliver an accusation, or ask for justice. Because justice is a word that means different things in different mouths, and in hers, it would have meant nothing the chamber could give. She said a name. Velun. One name carried on a harmonic that was the color of spring water, clear, bright, specific as a fingerprint. Then another. Soreth. This one deeper, darker, a chord that resonated against the chamber walls and made the nearest delegates flinch with its weight. Tuya, Kesend, Neve, names, after another, each one shaped by a different harmonic, each one glowing in a different color of light that her body produced as she spoke. Her bioluminescence cycling through shades that had no hue and names, that had no names in any language but the language of a people who had been using light to carry grief since before most of these species had discovered fire. She was naming the dead. Every Velith who had died since the vote, since the chamber had decided they were non-viable, since the embassies closed, since the ships left, since the Blight swallowed the ocean, and the Velith were pushed onto shrinking land, and the galaxy looked away. Name after name after name. The chamber was silent. Not the silence of politics, the other silence, the one that has no agenda, the one that sits in your chest and makes it hard to breathe, the one that is the sound of 300 species realizing at the same moment that they are listening to what they did. Minutes, 411 names. Taeyun spoke every single one, and her glow grew brighter with each name, as if the dead were filling her with light, as if each name returned something to her that the galaxy had taken. And by the end, she was luminous, the brightest any non-Velith had ever seen a Velith shine, standing in the center of a chamber designed to make individuals feel small. And she was not small. She was incandescent. She stopped. The last name hung in the air, Kelenth, and the harmonic faded the way all harmonics fade, gradually, and then all at once, and the chamber held its breath. Taeyun said nothing else. She turned and walked back through the lower gallery door. The vote took 7 minutes. Motion to sanction the Aresahan for engineered biological warfare against a sentient species, submitted by the junior Karethi delegate, who had not been alive during the first vote, and whose compound eyes had not left Taeyun's face for 4 straight minutes. It was not unanimous. The Aresan voted against. 11 species allied with the Aresan voted against. The rest, 300 species who had once voted to let the Velith die, voted yes, and the tally climbed in the same holographic display that had condemned the Velith. And this time, the numbers meant something different. A second motion followed, formal recognition of Velith sovereignty, full territorial rights, protected status with enforcement provisions that had actual teeth. This one passed by a wider margin. The Karethi delegate sat back in her seat when it was over, and her compound eyes reflected the chamber in fractures. And she said nothing to anyone, but her delegation's hive-link would later record that 6 billion minds had processed the vote simultaneously, and that the consensus emotion, the single feeling shared across an entire species, was the Karethi equivalent of, "It is not enough, but it is a start." They offered Voss the ambassadorship 3 days later. Ambassador to Suaneth, a posting that would have been the crowning achievement of any diplomatic career, a title that carried weight and history and the kind of significance that gets recorded in textbooks. Okonkwo delivered the offer personally, standing in the Harlan County's engine room, because Voss had been helping Rio repair the hull membrane she had authorized him to cannibalize. And she had grease on her hands and a look on her face that said she already knew what was coming. "You could do real good there," Okonkwo said. "I know," Voss replied. "You have the trust of the Velith. That is not a small thing, Voss. That is a thing that cannot be manufactured or assigned." "I know," she said. "Then why?" Voss wiped her hands on a rag that was already more grease than cloth. "Because I'm not a diplomat," she said. "I'm the person who shows up before the diplomats. Remember, too." She requested reassignment to patrol duty. She got it. 6 months passed. The northern ocean of Suaneth ran blue-green for the first time in 3 years. Not all of it, maybe a third, but a third of a living ocean is a universe to a species that had been watching it die. The filtration arrays were permanent now, built by a joint human-Velith engineering team that Rio led from a research station on the northern shore. He had resigned his commission. He had grown a beard that Sueth hated. Her harmonics produced a specific dissonant chord every time she looked at it, a sound the crew had started calling the beard frequency, and Rio kept the beard specifically because the sound made him laugh. Sueth still glowed violet sometimes, the color from her collapse, the color that no one had been able to name until Rio invented a name for it, which was not blue at all, but the name had stuck because Rio had said it once, and the translation team had logged it, and now it was in the official human Velith color lexicon, a permanent entry. Sueth blue, violet shift, high luminance, no direct spectral equivalent. C. Castellan, R. Taeyun stood on the shore. The same shore where she had asked Voss what she wanted, the same waterline, the same rocks. But the water was different now. A Velith child swam in the shallows, small, translucent, glowing in the full healthy spectrum of a juvenile who had never known black water, who had been born after the humans came, who would grow up not knowing what it meant to watch an ocean die because someone had decided her people were not worth keeping alive. Taeyun watched the child swim, and her glow was steady and warm, and she did not think about the vote, or the chamber, or the 411 names, because the names were spoken, and the dead were carried, and the living were swimming, and that was enough. Enough. The transmission arrived at midday. Routine frequency, non-urgent, flagged with the UEN Harlan County's identifier. A patrol frigate currently running escort through the outer spiral, on a route that happened, by a coincidence that convinced absolutely no one, to loop past Suaneth every 11 weeks. Taeyun opened it. The message was short, 4 words, no context, no preamble, no official heading or rank designation, or any of the things that military transmissions are supposed to include. Just 4 words, in the handwriting of a woman who did not sleep well, and who carried a pen from a planet she would never go back to, and who had once turned a garbage frigate toward a dying world because someone had to go first. Still loud, still here. Taeyun stood on the shore of an ocean that was learning to be alive again. She read the message twice. She glowed.